There we go. Hello, hello. Got me? Sound good, Brian?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I'll drop the phone. Oh. Damn.
It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
The end game here is we want to win the College World Series. So every decision you make from this point, if you know you're going to be in the NCAA tournament, you have to have some of that in mind. That being said, we want to win every game we play. So the next game we play is against Missouri on Tuesday, and we're going to try to win that game, period.
Momentum to me is, I don't know if I would say it's overrated, but it's always going to be dictated by your starting pitcher. So we've got to get off to good starts on the mound every game. We've got to swing the bats well. We've got to have a certain level of heightened awareness and a sense of urgency. And when we get runners in scoring position, we got to find ways to get runners in.
What's the name of the team?
Carolina Panthers.
Carolina Panthers. It's going to be the Carolina Panthers. And listen, there is a logical place for this team, and it's Charlotte, and it is the Carolina Panthers.
And a pleasant good evening to you and yours. Nice geography lesson from the new Panther owner. Welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. In our Columbia Main Street studios, Will Pelagic, Professor Tom Hayes. Our Phil Kornblut is in Hoover, Alabama at the SEC baseball tournament. We'll get to him. We'll get to all the stuff going on with the SEC and the ACC baseball tournament. Also, Target once looked like as a USC lock is shopping around, and this is obviously causing some consternation in Gamecock land and in Clemson fan land also when you think about it. An interesting prediction for South Carolina football for the 2018 season from one of its foremost pundits, and we'll also talk to South Carolina State football coach Buddy Pugh in our second hour, and here, as you heard in our open from the aforementioned new unanimously approved owner of the Carolina Panthers, David Tepper. Kerry Tharp also joins us here on a Tuesday, as he usually does, to go over NASCAR, the president of Darlington Raceway. But let's go out to the Hoover Met right now and join Phil Kornblut, who is live day one of the SEC tournament. One game already in the books, and one game, as I understand it, Korn, currently knotted up, tied to the ninth.
Yes, indeed. We were a strike away from being out of this game, but Kentucky got a two-out RBI double to tie the ball game up at 3. Kentucky and Auburn. Auburn is batting now in the bottom of the ninth inning. 3-9-1 for Kentucky, 3-7-0 for Auburn. So this one continues with one out in the bottom of the ninth. The weather right now, of course, it's going to be dicey with the weather throughout the rest of this day and into the night. And, of course, South Carolina's game has already been pushed back to past 10 o'clock Eastern time because we had over an hour delay in the first game of the day. In that first game of the day, it was Vanderbilt and Texas A&M, and Texas A&M sends the Commodores home in the elimination round for the second straight year, 3-1, the final score there. So the Commodores having, for them, a disappointing season with that loss. They go home and wait for the NCAA tournament bids to come out with only 31 wins on this season. That's a far cry from what Vanderbilt is used to. But, yes, we're looking forward to South Carolina and Missouri coming up a little bit later on tonight. It'll be a freshman making his first SEC start for the Gamecocks, and Carmen Mazinski, who has had his ups and downs this year. At times he can be dominating with the fastball. The numbers aren't all that impressive at this point, with an ERA climbing up near 5 for him. Missouri will counter with their regular Friday night starter going on 4 days rest, TJ Sycamore, who pitched well against the Gamecocks in their meeting in Columbia a couple of weeks ago, went 5 innings, went 4 1/3 innings, allowed 5 hits and just 1 run. So he was very, very good. And, Will, you were there for that series, so you got a chance to see him and how he handled the Gamecock hitters that night.
Yeah, I did, Corn. And the one thing that I think was the common theme throughout the entire series is just, despite the fact that there are a lot of right-handed hitters in this lineup, for some reason, whether it's the arm angle, whether it's not seeing the ball correctly, this team struggles against left-handed pitching. And the other thing to keep in mind from Missouri's perspective, Pro, is that they've kind of got a little bit of a silver bullet that they don't really put out unless they absolutely need to, and that's Bryce Montez de Oca out of the bullpen. He's been used sparingly over the last couple of weeks. Don't know whether there's an injury or not with him, but he was kind of their guy that they went to if they needed to win a ball game. They need their pitching, and they're pitching, obviously, with Sycamore in a win or possibly not make the NCAA tournament scenario. They're playing like a much more desperate team than the Gamecocks are tonight.
When South Carolina is going well offensively, they really lean on watching for the fastball. And I think probably more than Missouri, not so much that they were going against left-handers. I think those guys are throwing what hitters call junk, and they don't like it. They want to see some fastballs coming, and that's really what Missouri does. They changed a lot of speeds on South Carolina, kept them off balance all night long. So it'll be interesting what their strategy is this time out when he goes to the jump and see how they play it.
More on the ACC in a moment, but Corn, one more note on the Gamecocks. How do you feel this team will use the momentum of the last 5 weeks in the fact that they've played themselves basically into the SEC tournament, basically number 5 hole, which is kind of the most unlucky position to be in after the run that they've made to get them back into NCAA tournament consideration, but now having to play in a single elimination format? How will they react to that pressure?
Well, I think they'd feel a lot better if they had a healthy T.J. Hopkins that they could trot out to center field and have at the top of the order. He means so much to them when he's healthy. He just makes them an even better offensive lineup. But they are a hot team, as we noted last night, the best record in SEC play over the last 15 games at 11-4. So I think their confidence level is high. Mark Kingston, as you heard last night, talked about the fact that they're playing their best baseball of the season right now. So they are going in with a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum. This is a park that has historically not been kind to even the best USC baseball teams. It's funny how it works. You can't predict it, as John Sterling would say. You can't predict baseball. Last year, one of the worst USC baseball teams came in here and made a run to the semifinals, surprising everybody, and got beat by LSU in the semifinals. So I've seen outstanding USC baseball teams, teams that went on to Omaha, come in here and barely scratch the surface offensively, just, get shut out, not get any hits. And then we've seen some ragtag teams come in here and do well. So it's so hard to predict. I am a little bit I'd have to say the needle points toward Mizzou tonight going in, because it all starts with the guy on the mound, and I'd have to certainly give the nod to Missouri in the matchup on the mound to start this game out tonight.
Well, a couple of things. I think probably South Carolina's teams under Ray Tanner, they were like Earl Weaver, give me a 3-run homer. And then when you walk into that spacious ballpark, when it used to be spacious, I know they've moved the fences in. That kind of got them psyched out right from the beginning and said, let's get ready to go to Omaha. The other key point is the weather, because if it rains and it pushes that Missouri game back to say tomorrow, what does Kingman do his rotation?
Yeah, does he adjust the pitching staff?
Yeah, that's because that extra day, that makes you think.
Well, I would think that, if they get an extra day, they can go to if they wanted to go to Chapman, he'd be on 5 days rest since he pitched last Thursday. But one more thing about Sycamore, you talk about hot teams in South Carolina, a hot team coming in, but Sycamore is a hot pitcher. His last 2 outings at USC and against Tennessee, and keep in mind, Missouri had to win that series against Tennessee to make it to Hoover. He's been great. A combined 11 hits, a combined 2 earned runs, a combined 14 strikeouts in his last 2 outings. So they're not messing around Missouri, even though he's not going on normal rest. He's going on 4 days rest versus what would be the normal 6 days rest during the season. They're running their hoss out there trying to win this thing and improve their chances for an NCAA bid.
Certainly so. Again, we'll have that game again. There's another game in front of you guys in order to get that game underway. Mississippi State, LSU, that will get underway after Kentucky, Auburn are done. Also, a little bit of a backlog in the ACC tournament. Early today, it was Pittsburgh beating Georgia Tech 2-1. Florida State and Virginia are now knotted up at 2 apiece. They are also in extra innings. Not unlike what's going on in Hoover. They have just gone into the top of the 11th, Virginia and Florida State in pool play in the ACC tournament again, and also in Clemson's pool. Notre Dame and Miami meet tonight in the first game of Pool B. Clemson will not play until tomorrow against the Irish, which we'll preview. And also a very interesting note involving the departed defensive tackle from Clemson, Josh Belk, next on Sports Talk.
Hey, Brian, how's it sounding from here, please?
Sounds good. Hey, we're going to do Belk here.
Yeah. Go shopping at Belk's?
Sure, why not?
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Virginia has put the first two on against Florida State in the top of the 11th. Again, that is a pool play game in the ACC tournament. Some of the other matchups going on here earlier today in the Big South. It was Charleston Southern falling to High Point 6-5. That is a double elimination tournament. Therefore, Charleston Southern goes now into the losers bracket. They'll play the loser of Liberty and Radford later on tonight. It is Winthrop and Gardner-Webb, along with Campbell and Longwood. In the SoCon, Citadel's season ended by Western Carolina, a 6-5 score there. Later on tonight, it will be Samford and Furman, also Wofford and East Tennessee State. So we'll keep updated on those games as we go throughout the evening. Of course, College of Charleston getting themselves underway tomorrow in the CAA tournament. They play Hofstra in game 2 of the day. That takes place at 3. What's going on up at Hoover, Corn?
Well, I'm not so sure this is great news for the teams still to play, because we're still playing here. It's bottom of the 10th. Kentucky did not score in the top of the 10th, so it's 3-3 Kentucky and Auburn, and it's 5:21 local time, 6:21 in the East, and this game continues, and no telling how long it will go, and it just keeps pushing the schedule further and further behind. I will say that the skies have lightened up a good bit. There's still some dark clouds hovering around us, but right now it looks good, and hopefully the weather, the rain. I came through a lot of rain through Georgia and Alabama, just spot showers, heavy showers and spotty showers, and they're popping up all over this part of the country. So let's just hope that it stays away tonight and we don't have any weather delays to go along with the extended play we've got in this game. 3-3 Kentucky, Auburn batting in the bottom of the 10th.
Updating a couple more of the Big South. No score between Longwood and Campbell. It was Radford over Liberty 4-1. Again, the last game of the evening comes your way with Winthrop playing later on tonight. We'll keep you updated on that game against Gardner-Webb. Some interesting news, as reported by our friends at TigerNet, involving former Clemson defensive tackle Josh Bell. Per his attorney, Everett Stubbs, he has set a visit to South Carolina on Wednesday and a visit to Georgia on Thursday. We've been talking kind of all week, ever since we heard about the transfer of the young man who no longer plays at Clemson, a Louisville native, about whether or not he wants to go closer to home and be by his family. A family issue was brought up by many who are close to him, coaches and people and the like. Corn, your thoughts about the fact that he has set a visit to South Carolina, but also has set a visit to Georgia, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Athens further away than Clemson from his home in Louisville still at this point.
Yeah, and let's give proper credit. They were just retweeting what was reported by the Chester News and Reporter. They talked to the attorney, Everett Stubbs, who is out of Chester, and he told them that he's going to visit South Carolina tomorrow and Georgia on Thursday. Yes, it's 176 miles from Chester to Athens. That's 3 hours. And you go down 85, and, of course, you'll go right past Clemson as you're heading to Athens. So, yeah, and we'll see what, Georgia, we had heard some talk that Georgia was going to be a player with him as this thing started to unfold. Tennessee, of course, has reached out to him as well. And South Carolina has always been there since this thing unfolded. And again, if it's all about being closer to home, then it should certainly be a slam dunk for South Carolina. But you go and you make your visit and you hear the pitch and you look at the depth chart and where you think you're going to have the greatest immediate impact. And, maybe that is more of a decisive factor than anything related to family considerations as this thing continue. He could easily just say, I'm going to South Carolina, closest place to home, and be done with it. But if he is going to be visiting other places farther away, then that also tells me that there's more to it than just family considerations. There's also football considerations coming into play here too.
Does that, tarnish the story a little bit for you? Because, again, we were led to believe, Pro, that this was done almost out of, I don't want to say mercy, but, with the kid's consideration at heart because of, again, a family situation that caused him to be closer to home. Does that not change the story a bit in your eyes if he doesn't end up at South Carolina?
Well, let me put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that Friday he's taking a trip to Oregon. You know, they need some defensive tackles out there. But I know I'm being facetious, but here's the thing. What frustrates me is, okay, I understand that we've heard that his mother's having some health issues. But if your feeling is that you want to get out of a situation you're in, just tell us the truth. You know, it may not sound good to some people, but if that's the way you feel, people will understand your decision. This going about giving a story that's palatable to everybody, that's not going to work. So I'm sort of taken aback.
Corn?
Yeah, I would think that if you're Dabo Swinney, I'd be pissed off.
Yeah.
If this is more than just a family thing and it's more of a football thing, I'd be pissed off. I gave you a complete release based on the fact that you wanted to stay closer to home, and that means South Carolina. But then again, maybe we're splitting hairs here. I mean, of course, South Carolina is the only place he can go that is closer to home than Clemson. If he goes to Tennessee or he goes to Georgia, that's a longer trip, if you want to break it down by miles and by car travel, than it is to go to Clemson. Are we splitting hairs a little bit when we're talking about staying close to home? I mean, air quotes there around close to home. Neither Tennessee nor Georgia is a long way away. I mean, we're not talking a plane ride. We're talking about a pretty comfortable car ride. But just in terms, if you want to pinpoint the mileage, and yes, it's South Carolina would be his only logical choice if that's the true reason for making this move. So
here's my concern is that, again, in the aftermath of this, Dabo Swinney was looked at as, again, a hero, a triumpher, somebody who did the right thing for a guy who was trying to seek his way out. With something involving his family. If this all of a sudden turns about football, that makes the young man look like he lied. And that's the unfortunate part, because then again, like Pro said, if he just came down to he was just not happy at Clemson and not comfortable at Clemson, well, then just say that. Like, I don't understand why people have said that before.
Well, perhaps there was some bargaining going on here, and who knows? We're all just speculating here, but maybe it was like, if from a Clemson standpoint, let's separate amicably here. We'll give you the full release to go where you want to, and you say nothing negative about your experience at Clemson. I mean, maybe a little bit of bargaining going on there, if indeed that's what it's all about. I don't know. We're all just guessing here. I know one thing for a fact. We're going to the top of the 11th here. Auburn just had somebody hit one to the wall and left, but it was caught, so we're going to the 11th, 3-3.
Thrill 2-2 right now in Durham between Virginia and Florida State. They're holding up the start of Miami and Notre Dame. That is a game of principal Clemson concern, because those are the other two teams that play in their pool. Clemson will play Notre Dame at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, Miami at 7 o'clock on Thursday. The Tigers have still not named a starter for their game on Wednesday. I was talking with some insiders. It seems to me like the safe bet, Colin, would be Strider. I don't know if they want to test Hennessy yet. They might throw Hennessy out of the bullpen. That was something Monty Lee said yesterday might be the case for him. Might be the best way to use him this week. But if you read the tea leaves, it's basically on almost normal rest. 5 days rest would be Spencer Strider's rest time after he pitched Thursday against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and what an advantage for Clemson. I mean, this is truly unfair scheduling by the ACC. I'd love to hear the thoughts of the Notre Dame coach about this. To have to play a game in your pool, okay, and then the other team in your pool is getting the day off, and you've got to play them tomorrow. And now you're in extra innings. Did you say they're in extra innings?
They're in the 11th right now.
Yeah, so they're in extra innings. I don't have their box in front of me, so I don't know how many pitchers they have used up at this point. But, I mean, if this thing continues, they're going to chew up a bunch of innings with a bunch of pitchers here, and that's just going to put them even further behind the eight ball. Not that they would beat Clemson anyway, but you never know.
This is not Notre Dame playing right now. This is Virginia and Florida State. Notre Dame and Miami still haven't started yet. So.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about Notre Dame. Well, even then, Notre Dame is still going to have to use up pitching tonight. And who knows how deep they'll have to go into their bullpen and how shorthanded it's going to leave them when they play Clemson tomorrow. We talked about that last night. I think that's just unfair scheduling. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Did we hit the break?
Did you hear the music, Corn?
No, I couldn't hear the music.
Trying to inch it up, but not overpower you.
No, I didn't hear any. I should have been looking at the clock, but I had my eye off of it. Did we get into it clean?
No.
No. Crap. Well, next time that happens, just pop me down and have Will take it, when it gets close to the break.
Okay.
Just have him break in. I'm sorry, I had my eye off the clock. Still sounding pretty solid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sports Talk brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. Visit foundersfcu.com. See how they can assist you in all of your financial needs. Florida State has a man on with one out in the bottom of the 11th ACC tournament in Durham. What's going on up at Hoover, Corn?
Well, we continue on here. We go to the bottom of the 11th inning. It is 3-3, Kentucky and Auburn. Kentucky, of course, tied this game in the top of the ninth with a dramatic two-out, two-strike double that drove in the tying run. It keeps their season alive, at least for now. And Auburn is coming up. It's 3-8-0 for the Tigers, 3, 11-1 for Kentucky. And Auburn having a interesting year for Auburn. They got off to such a great start. Remember, they were dominating, kind of cooled off over the second half of the season. Still a 7 seed coming into today's game. The winner of this one will move on to play Ole Miss tomorrow. First game of the day tomorrow at 10:30 Eastern Time, Texas A&M and Georgia. The winner of this one will play Ole Miss following that. And then tonight we've got LSU and Mississippi State. The winner plays Florida tomorrow. And then USC and Missouri probably won't finish until sometime Wednesday morning, and they'll turn around the winner and play Arkansas in the last game tomorrow night.
Looks like we have a final. Florida State has just walked it off on Virginia by a final score of 3-2, an RBI double that brings home the winning run by Albert of Florida State to score Mendoza. A 3-2 final. Florida State beats Virginia. It really took a lot more, I think, for Florida State than they expected going in, but that at least clears the deck now for the Notre Dame-Miami contest, which I said before is of Clemson importance because that is the other game in their pool.
I was about to say, you got to know that Florida State had to leave a lot of guys on base. They had 9 hits. So
they left 8 on base. Virginia left 9. One more on the Belk thing before I get to the Tony Barnhart Gamecock projection. You know, I don't know how Dabo Swinney feels if he goes somewhere other than South Carolina. Do you feel relief if he ends up at Georgia or Tennessee because you don't have to play them in the regular season? You might have to see Georgia in the playoff down the road. But, I mean, are we making too much out of how wrong Clemson fans or how angry Clemson fans might actually be happy if he doesn't go to South Carolina?
Well, first of all, it does cut into Clemson's depth on their defensive line.
Right.
When you consider the fact that they're going to be losing a large number of really good players off their defensive line after this season. And, they were counting on this guy to develop and become one of the next standouts on their defensive line. So that leaves them a little bit shorthanded there that they can make up, of course, in the recruiting process. It's a rarity that you have a football player transfer between the two schools. It's a rarity you have any athlete transfer between the two schools, though now we've seen one on the women's basketball side this spring. We may see another one in football. And, if he ends up at South Carolina and is playing Clemson every year and is an all-SEC caliber performer at South Carolina, darn right Clemson fans will be upset about it because, they want to keep the best players that they have within their program. But it didn't work out that way for him, and we'll see what happens. I mean, again, he potentially can be a dominating interior defensive lineman with his size and his athletic skills. And that is something South Carolina, of course, really needs to help move their program up the chain.
Mr. College Football Tony Barnhart, speaking of South Carolina, has them for a very interesting projection going into the 2018 season. He has them finishing second in the SEC East to Georgia. He has Georgia going 7-1 with their only loss, Corn, to South Carolina, week 2 at Williams-Brice Stadium. He has South Carolina losing twice after going their first 6 in a row. In the win column, he has them losing at Ole Miss and at Florida in the month of November. So it should be interesting to see how this kind of plays itself out. But how do you feel about that projection from Mr. College Football?
Boy, how crazy would Gamecock fans be if they beat Georgia and they continue on through the season undefeated in SEC play? And I imagine if what I'm reading from Tony is what he's thinking, I don't have it right in front of me, so he must believe the Gamecocks will be undefeated as they move through the season until they get to Ole Miss, until they get to Florida on the road. I mean, I could see that scenario certainly playing itself out. I certainly think South Carolina playing at home will give Georgia a very good game and they might possibly upset them. Going on the road to Ole Miss, the Gamecocks haven't played there a whole lot. When they have gone down there, it normally hasn't gone well for them. And then going to Florida with their new situation, I would give them maybe a better shot at winning in Gainesville. I got to see how well Florida comes along this season with Mullen and their situation at quarterback. I would give them a better shot at winning down at Florida than maybe even beating Georgia at home. That's just how good Georgia might be. What did he say their final record would be overall? Did he say?
He didn't say overall. He was just talking about in the conference. So he has 6-2 in the SEC East. 7-1 would be Georgia, and they would win the division.
Yeah. Well, Tony, it seems like he made that pick so he could stay in Georgia for the season because he picked against Georgia. But I could see his logic with this because as good as Georgia's exceptional as their recruiting was, a lot of times you don't get instantaneous results from freshmen. So they lost a whole bunch of guys, especially on defense last year, and the two big stud running backs, that Georgia may be playing with a little cog loose early in the season until they can get their sea legs. So I can see South Carolina maybe ambushing Georgia because of the way they are in the schedule early on. But, I still say South Carolina, even through the season, if they stay relatively healthy, should beat Ole Miss. I don't care if it's in the Grove or wherever it is, they should beat Ole Miss.
Is it bad that the one that I don't like, or at least the game that scares me the most, is not Ole Miss, it's not Florida, it's at Kentucky, because for some damn reason, this team has a mental lock against the Wildcats, for whatever reason?
Well, yeah, I think that
you said that
historically here of late, it's been Kentucky's year against Kentucky's game against South Carolina, and of course last year Gamecocks lost Deebo Samuel in that game, so that didn't help. I think that was the game he got hurt in, correct?
It was, and they should have won that game. Part and parcel, I think, a lot of because, again, the shock value of losing Deebo in that third quarter, they really didn't know what to do. And, oh, by the way, the Gamecocks had the problem that became so relevant over the course of the year, they couldn't get a yard on third down.
Well, the interesting thing is that when you look at Kentucky over the last few years, they won a game that South Carolina was dominating at Kentucky because Marcus Lattimore went out with a leg injury.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, years later, you come back and here's Deebo going down. And let's face it, South Carolina has for some years dominated Kentucky. And so, the pendulum was going to change at some point. But Kentucky has had a kind of ride with some of the injuries South Carolina has suffered within the ball game.
They took advantage, Kentucky did offensively, of a porous South Carolina run defense, and they hurt them both with the running back. We remember the game up at Kentucky where they just ran the ball right down the Gamecocks' throats, and then they had they used a mobile quarterback, which gave the Gamecocks fits as well. That junior college transfer was outstanding for Kentucky. So, I mean, they've had the personnel matchups to work in their favor against South Carolina. Sometimes against certain teams, year in and year out, the matchups just don't work in your favor. It's hard to explain, but that's been South Carolina's case the last few years. But now Kentucky has probably got to do a little bit of rebuilding on the offensive side, and we'll see how much they change offensively and if that maybe works in the Gamecocks' favor. Plus, the Gamecocks will be better, I think, across the board, especially on defense.
You can tweet us at SportsTalkSC. We got a lot of responses on this. Someone says, I honestly think Mark Stoops has something on us or something. Their running backs the last few years have carved us up. Another person says if this particular scenario happens, beating Georgia and losing to Ole Miss in Florida, USC would probably need Georgia to lose to Auburn, and then it's win the East. He said he would sign up for that season in a heartbeat. Again, a very big characteristic of a lot of young teams is they don't know what they don't know early in the season, and they might be able to get a team like a Georgia early in the season, but then kind of come back crashing down to reality if things somehow regress to the mean in November at the end of the year. We'll talk more about that, more Clemson, more ACC and SEC baseball, and recruiting next from Corn in Hoover when we come back on Sports Talk.
Runner on second, one out. Still solid here, Brian?
Yeah, still good.
Yeah, knock on wood. They've got a very strong wireless signal here.
We'll say he has the Watson sound. We'll play it in the last segment.
Okay. Okay, that should do it. Booyah. Kentucky loses. Auburn wins.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Got a final here.
So 2 games in the books in Durham. It was Pittsburgh winning earlier today against Georgia Tech 2-1. Florida State walks off in the 11th on Virginia by a score of 3-2. They will start the final game of play in Durham tonight between Notre Dame and Miami. Again, the one of Clemson importance at 7:33 Eastern Time. We'll keep you updated on that as we go throughout the evening. What's going on between Kentucky and Auburn, Corn?
Well, we have a winner. It's the Auburn Tigers. They get a game-winning base hit here in the bottom of the 11th. You can call it a walk-off if you like. It's Edward Julian, a freshman, with the base hit that delivers the winning run for Auburn. So Auburn wins it 4-3, 4-10-0 for the Tigers, 3-11-1 for the Wildcats. Probably, well, I wouldn't say probably. Probably without a doubt ends Kentucky's season at 34-22, but only 13-17 in the league coming in. I would think they're not going to make the NCAA tournament with that record. And Auburn, with the win, improves to 38-19 and gives them 16 SEC wins now, 16-15 after a 15-15 regular season. So Auburn advances and will play Ole Miss in the second game tomorrow. And earlier today, it was Texas A&M surprising the 6th seed. That's an 11 over a 6. It was 3-1 Texas A&M defeating Vanderbilt.
Are you trying to tell me you don't like the phrase walk off? Is this like your RBIs thing?
Yes, I mean I created the best phrase ever created for a game-ending home run,
which is
a go homer.
That's stupid. That's very stupid.
I think it's the greatest one ever created in the history of baseball.
That's garbage. That's garbage.
Oh, by the way, I walked in. I had the pleasure of walking in today to the arena with the Missouri baseball crew, and they
were thanking
me. I don't know why. After they introduced themselves. We exchanged pleasantries. They're thanking me. I said, why are you thanking me so much? They said, thank you for taking Will Pelagic out of Missouri and stuffing him in South Carolina.
Is that a fact? Is that a fact? That's not. After all the alcohol I bought them when they were down here for that series, that seems congruous. Earlier today, Western Carolina beats Citadel 6-5. That ends the Bulldog season again tomorrow in the Big South. Excuse me, in the SoCon tournament tomorrow. That will be Samford and Furman. They'll play at 4. Wofford and East Tennessee State will play at 7:30. Colonial Athletic Association tournament takes place tomorrow, beginning with Charleston taking on Hofstra. As we mentioned also earlier today, we were talking about Charleston Southern. They lost their game earlier today, and then Winthrop will play Gardner-Webb here tonight. A couple of other notes to get along here with you as well throughout the night. We'll talk to Buddy Pugh, South Carolina State football coach, at 7. We'll hear from the new Panther owner, David Tepper, and we'll also hear from the quarterback of the Houston Texans, Trevor Lawrence. I mean Deshaun Watson, because we're anointing Trevor for every other job.
I'm gonna predict with number 12, getting up there in age, that in 2 years the Green Bay Packers will select Trevor Lawrence as the quarterback of the future.
Now he's going to transfer to North Carolina and then apply for immediate eligibility for the NFL draft, and they'll let him happen because that's what happens at North Carolina. No,
boy, you have really picked up the baton there on the North Carolina shots.
I'm all about it. Well, you know why it is? It's because I'm heading there tomorrow, so I have to acclimate myself to the hate. I'm all about the NC hate. All right, what do you have for recruiting today, sir?
All right, just to recap the top story coming out of Chester, the Chester News and Reporter reported today that according to the attorney for former Clemson defensive lineman Josh Belk will visit USC on Wednesday and Georgia on Thursday. So let the circus begin. Now, a couple of players making decisions in the next couple of days. Linebacker Jamar Brown, Fort Lauderdale. He's on Thursday. Time to be determined. Probably going to be around 6 o'clock or so. USC, Miami, and Stanford. He said he should make up his mind sometime today where he's going. USC's been on him real hot and heavy for some time. He's been to summer camps, and USC coaches had their 2 evaluations at the school, Travaris Robinson and Coleman Hutzler. He had a lot of conversation with them. He gets a lot of contact from them practically every day. The Gamecocks are on him more than the other 2 in terms of the daily contact, but Stanford and the education aspect really appealing to him. He is a guy that's really into getting his degree and getting the best education he can get, but he also wants to play, of course, quality football. So he's got all that going through his mind. Now, he did reveal Monday that he has set an official visit to USC for June 1st. He says you can draw any conclusion you want to from that, but he wouldn't advise it. He says it's just a coincidence that he scheduled that visit around the time that he's going to make his decision. So don't draw any conclusions based on that, he said.
No jumping conclusions, Matt.
Yeah. Now, Friday, tight end Luke Deal from Emerald will announce his commitment sometime between 7 and 8:30 because he's going to have a family gathering and friends and all that, and he's going to announce his decision. Clemson, Notre Dame, Auburn, Michigan, and NC State under consideration. Ohio State was also in the mix, but he said Ohio State was not included in that final list that he gave me. He took officials to each of the finalists except Clemson. Of course, he's been there several times unofficially. He was there this past Friday for one final visit with the Tigers. He sat in to watch video with the tight ends coach, Danny Pearman, went over a lot of X's and O's and got some things answered from a depth chart standpoint and a procedural standpoint for how the Tigers use their tight ends, and he said that was good for him to check all that out. Recruiters from all the schools except Clemson will be in to make pitches this week. Clemson has already used its 2 visits. NC State was in Monday, Auburn and Notre Dame in today, Michigan in on Thursday. He's also expecting Ohio State to come back through. So he's going to try to make the decision here in the next couple of days, then announce it to everybody on Friday. And he said that he's just looking for the fit, and he's looking to where he can thrive and improve the next 3 to 4 years. Clemson made the top 5 with defensive lineman Fatui Tuitele of Honolulu, along with Ohio State, Texas, Washington, and Alabama. USC offered 2020 running back DJ Lundy of Ocilla, Georgia. Auburn, UAB, and Troy also offered. Linebacker Lakia Henry of Dodge City Junior College in Kansas, who committed to Tennessee on Sunday, told us he will continue to take visits. He's been to Tennessee and Ole Miss and has planned to visit USC this summer. Two of the hottest recruits in state, defensive back Cam Smith of Westwood and Irmo receiver Kendrell Flowers, continue to pull in offers. Smith was offered by Florida State, and Flowers was offered by Penn State. And let's see here. In basketball, let's get to the basketball note that I have. USC getting a visit from 6'6" A.J. Lawson from GTA Prep in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Talking to his coach last night, USC got on him after recruiting his big man who ended up going to UTEP, Casey Izagwu. Lawson, his father, is from Columbia. And so he's got ties to the capital city. In fact, the father grew up a Gamecock fan. So they're coming in for a visit on June 1st. They live now in Brampton, Ontario. He averaged about 21 points per game this season. His coach says he's a very good player, outside shooter, long arms, can defend and all that kind of stuff.
He's going to play guard, eh?
Exactly. He's also going to set officials with SMU and Creighton, plus he's getting attention from Oregon and Tulane. But the fact that his dad grew up in Columbia, Gamecock fan, that could be very helpful for USC. All right, that's a look at recruiting. Remind everyone to check it out on the website, sportstalksc.com. On Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting.
Latest Baseball America projections, by the way, have Clemson as the number 8 national seed hosting Tennessee Tech, Kentucky, and Campbell. That's out just fresh today. It has Coastal Carolina hosting as a 15th seed, hosting UConn, Oklahoma, and Kent State. And the Gamecocks on the 2 line at number 4 national seed UNC, along with Illinois and North Carolina A&T. We'll get into more of that as we go throughout hour 2, including hearing from Darlington President Kerry Tharp, new Panthers owner David Tepper, Deshaun Watson, and when we come back off the top of the hour, we'll hear from South Carolina State football coach Buddy Pugh as he begins his final season at the helm of South Carolina State. Hour 2 coming your way from Columbia and Hoover. We return on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
All right, Corn, I'm going to restart the YouTube.
You mean the Periscope? You mean the Hangout?
Yeah, I'm going to restart the Hangout just in case the audio get messed up.
You're going to thank you. You're going to restart mine as well?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm going to restart it and then send you another invite.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.